Well, over here I replaced that cap that was microphonic, and that's gone. I took out that silver mica, put in one of the Vichy ceramics I like, 500 picofarad there. And then I turned my attention to these two 150 nanofarad mustards. And I wanted to check their value and make sure that there's no leakage. And to check their value, you need to be out of circuit, so I carefully removed them. And this one measures 157 nanofarad. This one measures 159 nanofarad. So as far as the actual capacitance, they are well within spec. But the next thing I wanted to check was leakage. And in this particular part of the circuit, you cannot measure the leakage accurately with them connected, because they're connected to the grids of the output tubes. And for a host of reasons, that just adds a lot of complications. Neither can you just leave them disconnected, because then you'll have all kinds of high false readings. So I tipped in two 1 meg resistors from each leg that should only have AC and no DC, going to ground here, and let the amp run for about 5-10 minutes, let everything get hot, get everything flowing, and I measure between 300 and 400 millivolts and between 400 and 500 millivolts, each of these. So there is some leakage there, and that can be a contributing factor to the lack of oomph this amp had. And that problem would only get worse. And it's not exhibiting itself as a noise, because the reference is to ground here, and so it's just barely above that, and et cetera, et cetera. And it is still much lower, even with 300-400 millivolts on the grid, much lower at the grid than it is at the cathode. So it's not really going to throw off the operation of the tube in that noticeable way, but it's best to get rid of any leaking DC before it becomes an actual problem, which could actually kill output tubes if that were to go any more positive than maybe 1 volt. So I'm going to change these two out for some 100 nanofarad Mallories, like the rest of them. And I'm going to go through my stash, and I might even have some white ones somewhere. All right, back to the phone mic, because this is going to be a little bit loud. All right, I've got some 100 nanofarad kind of generic caps in that I pulled from a Fender build. I do not have two white 100 nanofarad Mallories as I thought. I had one, and all the other Mallory 100s I have different typefaces on them. Different eras of Mallory 150Ms have had various typography, and it's nice for them to match. Anyway, I've got some special caps being ordered along with some of the ceramic discs, and I'll show those when the time comes. However, the removal of that leakage has made what I think is an improvement in the sound, and I'm going to test that touch response that I touched on in the other video with the channels jumpered and the Telecaster, and see if I get that feedback and that bloom. This is with both channels, about 2 o'clock on the normal, about 2 o'clock on the brilliant, and the cut about 10 o'clock.
the verge. I'm gonna give it just a little bit more channel gain. I'm trying to find the response. There's a thing with AC30s. If I turn up too much, I'm gonna get into that crosstalk. I mean that ghosting. It is so close. We're just not quite over that hump. Let me try a different pickup. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. That was with the Telecaster bridge pickup. Oh, about 7K. Not that DCR is the end-all be-all predictor of pickup output. Oh, it's in the other room. Let me pause this. All right, with the SG and its bridge pickup is just under 8K. Not the best tuning, sorry, I just picked it up early in the morning. Some of that's not the prettiest because of the tuning. Some of that's not the prettiest because I'm sitting with the pickups 2 feet from the power transformer. But that is telling me that the amp is much more alive than it was, but it's not quite to that magic yet where things want to just take off and sing at the higher volumes. And it's not because I want this to be a high gain amp. It's because I know when the amp is behaving at higher volumes, like we would associate from a good JTM45, that all the clean stuff is going to be very alive as well. And just in my experience, that Blues Breaker Fresh Cream range of gain is very much there on a healthy AC30, even just on the normal channel by itself when it's really pushed. And that translates. That tells me that the rest of the clean stuff tends to be quite good, and we're just not there yet. We are much closer than we were. Every little bit helps, and I look forward to finding what the remaining little things are. Notice that aside from pulling that Top Boost add-on card, just because I've got to get some parts ordered for it, nothing radical really has been done here. There's not a whole bunch of changes. It's lead dress. It's 2 caps that weren't quite up to snuff, 3 caps that weren't quite up to snuff. I'll change out that one over there in the phase inverter input, and then getting the vibe trim channel gain back up to where it ought to be. And that is much closer now. Let's show that. I've got the trim hardwired on. That big pop is gone. There's still a little bit of a click. That's unavoidable. Now this channel does not quite have as much gain as it ought still, but has a lot more than it did now that that cap right there has been changed out. You can't see where I'm pointing. Change out that cap, it's much better. So it is almost there. And honestly, that might be related to the same thing happening in the output, where the output is just staying a little too tight, a little harmonically less interesting than it ought to be. So I'm not going to do anything else on the trim channel. I've already verified that all the resistors are the correct value. He made no mistakes that I've found so far. We're going to change out those silver micas in the trim channel, like I mentioned, but my focus is still on the output section, the phase inverter, and to a degree the preamp for the top boost and normal channels. While I've got the owner's attention on this video, he has a question about adding a master volume to this app. And that can be difficult to do neatly because the front panel, the top panel, really has no space for an added master volume. About the only good option that there is would be either to add another card onto the rear of the amp, like the top boost card, which is a little metal panel into the wood on the rear panel with a pot there, or just to put a pot right about here on the bottom panel. There are two kinds of master volumes that work well in this amp. There's the Larmar, which replaces those 220K resistors to ground that are on the grid leaks of the output tubes, with a dual gang 250K pot. Or, and I think this would probably be the better way to do it given the relative complexity of that and the fact that any pot added to that bottom wooden panel would need to be easily disconnected for accessing stuff down here for future service. And it would be good to have that master volume not only easily removed for service, but to not affect the circuit when it is out. I would say probably just a 1 meg pot, a 1 meg audio taper pot, which is called the Crossline, which is what Matchless did, though they used a 500K on a push-pull, so you have to pull it out to engage it. You want either to have a switched pot so that it can be out of the circuit, because the 500K does have an impact, or you want a 1 meg, which is functionally out of the circuit at 1 meg, and you won't begin to hear any difference until you turn it down and get about 600K of resistance. So there'd be a little bit of wasted travel below that. It would work quite well. And that would just connect. Let me find my pointer. I'll use this this paintbrush. You can just connect to these junctions right here. This is where the output phase inverter output coupling caps go to these 220K grid leaks to ground, and that's where the wires, here in this case, this white and this green, go to the grids of the tubes down here. So if you had a 1 meg pot attached to the wooden shelf with just 2 wires with a little bit of slack coming right here and right here, it'd be fairly easy to disconnect those in the future should you need to service anything down here and pull that wooden panel. And with those wires disconnected, the amp would still work normally. But with that connected, whether you did a 500K on a push-pull or just a 1 meg standard pot, when it's on 10 or not engaged, it'd be out of the circuit. It wouldn't be quite as good sounding at the lowest volumes as the Larmar stuff, but it would be certainly, has worked for a lot of matchless owners over the years.